Hi, I am Jen Erickson, but where is Cesar Nader, you may ask? Do not worry, you will see him shortly. For this episode of the Transition Success Podcast, he invited me to interview him about the Military Veteran Transition Playbook program. I will walk you through our interview, sharing insights and additional thoughts about our conversation. Thank you for tuning in. Let's check out the interview.
Hello and welcome to the Transition Success Podcast, the official podcast of the Military Veteran Transition Program. With us today is Jen Erickson, and she is going to take over the program. She's going to interview us to make sure that we get specific questions filtered out for some of our viewers who I know are trying to figure out what is the program about and how can we tailor it more to some of our audience. So Jen, you're now in charge. I'm handing the baton. Take it away.
Thank you. Well, it's an honor to be here on your podcast, Cesar, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let's talk about the Military Veteran Transition Playbook. What is it?
Good question. So just like the word says, I think we intentionally use the word playbook because we realize as veterans that there's no one answer to the transition process. And that's the frustrating part. I think that a lot of people think that, well, if you take the 1 week course for transition, then you're going to be ready for the workforce. And it's not so. So from the concept of playbook, we figured we use this as a platform. So it's actually Military Veteran Transition Playbook program. So this platform will allow people who want to serve and help with the program bring in their module and integrate it into one of our phases. And because it is a phased approach, you can take the 2 years that the program is designed to be done in, or you can take a more sort of a flexible, scalable approach. Say, I'm going to take phase 1, phase 3, and phase 5, and I'm going to go work on that. Because maybe you're on a short timeline for transition. So the MVTP program is meant to be a different sizes for different fits for all of our viewers. If you're in phase 1 and you don't know when to get out, then you start there. But if you already know these pieces, maybe you start in phase 3. Now you figure out what you want to do and how that's going to effectively help you in your transition. Because again, remember, we have veterans that are in different ranks, different locations, different family composition, even their kids are at different ages. So there's no way to just tell you, here's a program that's going to help you transition. Now go figure it out. You have to have a modular approach, a playbook, where people can take the plays out and figure out the best strategy to effectively transition out of the military.
I like it. I can tell you're passionate about it.
100%.
Why did you create this program?
Well, back in 2001, when I got commissioned as a second lieutenant, I had done 10 years as an enlisted Marine, and I was a gunnery sergeant, E7, and I knew that in order to get out as an officer, which is again part of that whole phase 1 plan when to get out, I realized that I had to do 10 years as an officer to retire with military pay as an officer. If you retire less than 10 years, you retire with the rank and benefits of that rank in the enlisted side. So right there you start to see that there was no way to go somewhere and say, well, where do I go to figure out now when do I want to get out? So then in those 10 years, I became obsessed with what happens after 10 years. I got 10 years left in the military. Then what? Yeah. I knew from the moment I joined the Marine Corps in 1990, when my senior recruiter my senior drill instructor brought 2 binders of stuff he had accomplished. And he said one thing. He said, it's not a matter of if you get out of the military. It's when you get out of the military. So, it even starts back then, but I didn't become as obsessed and passionate until I became a second lieutenant. And I'm like, well, I got 10 years. So I knew at age 39, in June or May or July of 2011, think about that, it's 2001. And I'm thinking now 2011. What do I do in 10 years? So I went to retirement ceremonies, to transition programs. They almost stopped letting me into the transition program because I was like, okay, you've graduated from this thing, you're magna cum laude, go away. So that started that passion about how to craft the right program that will help every veteran in every service, every rank, every location, with any family composition or title in job, career path that they had. How can they effectively transition regardless of where they started and where they were going?
In preparing my interview with Cesar, I watched this next video clip in which he highlights his transition story.
So my involvement with veterans started truly when I started my transition. Remember I told you that I started transitioning from the military 10 years out. I learned very quickly that we didn't have a robust transition program, at least at the time that I was getting out. It's gotten better and better and better. They've done a terrific job these days. The Department of Labor, SBA, Department of Defense, they're in a memorandum of agreement or memorandum of understanding, as they call MOU, to try to improve the transition for veterans. But at that time it was really difficult because you got a very limited time to figure out how to market yourself. You see, it takes 13 weeks to make a Marine. It takes 6 months to make a Marine officer, from civilian to graduation. You get 1 week to transition out of the military, the Marine Corps. 1 week. So think about that. Gladwell says that it takes 10,000 hours to become a true professional in your field. Imagine trying to change that in a week. How do you become a professional job hunter in a week when you spend 20 years in the military being a professional hunter, right? You're moving, shooting, and communicating. You're learning the steps. Just like that pilot, Sully, landed that plane in New York. And it was like second nature to him, right? Second nature, to land that plane safely, nobody got hurt. That's an expert. So when you become a military expert, the last thing on your mind is the day you're going to have to get out. But one thing I remember clearly from my senior drill instructor in boot camp, he said there's only one thing certain about your career in the Corps. One day you will have to get out. It's not whether you will, if you will, maybe. No, you will leave the Corps one way or another. He didn't specify the other. But the one way was you have to transition out. And he brought these 2 binders of stuff he had achieved in the military. He goes, this is what I've done in my career. Of this stuff, most of it will not matter in the civilian sector. So you better think about that early and often. That design the Marine, the perfect Marine, bearing, courage, decisive, dependability, and it goes on. We have an acronym, it's called JJ Did Tie Buckle. If you follow those letters, it gives you the 14 leadership traits in the Marine Corps. I've been out of the Corps 5 years. I still remember that from boot camp 25 years ago. You see, it's a code that's built into you. You learn BAMSIS, how to plan for an operation. You learn OPSEC. You learn SMEAC. All of these terms make sense to Marines. What doesn't make sense to Marines is how to market a position where you are a motor transport specialist. How do you market that in the civilian sector? How do you market that you were a logistics officer of a combat unit, engineer company? How do you market that you were a combat engineer in the civilian sector? There are some jobs that do have correlated titles, but the hardest thing for a veteran is to figure out how does what you did become a marketable skill in the civilian sector? How do you make sure that you get the widest net to have the best opportunity for the best job? So I knew after 10 years of doing this, while I was in the Marine Corps as an officer, that I need to do something. If I got out and I figured it out, I was going to go back and I was going to share that with my fellow Marines and my fellow veterans and anyone who would listen. And so I took 10 years of lessons. In 6 months of that experience where I told you I went on those hundreds of screenings and 40 plus interviews, had job offers, where I looked at the difference between salary and compensation, the difference between quality of life and standard of living, the difference between a W-2 and a 1099, employee versus consultant. So we'll take our families wherever we can to find a job that we believe is good for us. And that's the wrong approach. So I do everything I can to help organizations like Hire Our Heroes, Objective Rally Point, and there's a ton of them. I can't name all of them, but any organization that has the desire to help veterans, I volunteer to share with them the experiences that I've learned, not because I'm the expert, it makes sense to listen to another veteran who has got out, any one of us, to share their lessons with you, to be able to understand what's it going to take for you to be successful and hit your target at 500 meters.
1. What's it going to take to be successful? That is most likely a question on the minds of many of you. There's another question that I also hope to address with Cesar. Why is this important? Why is this important to active duty as well as those who have transitioned out and they're still in those early stages of trying to figure it out? Why is it so important?
A lot of people don't know this, but the largest unemployment group within the military are those 20-something to 30-something. And I say that broad because it changes. Very high unemployment. I talk a lot about the Marine Corps perspective of it because that's what I know. So I'm gonna address it in that sense. The Marine Corps is a young force by design. So every 4 years, what they call first termers, they have to be either re-enlisted or they have to get out. Did you know that 3 out of every 4 Marines have to get out? We only keep 1.
Wow.
There is a sobering piece of information. The Marine Corps is a young force by design. So every 4 years we recycle 3 out of 4 young guys, and then we bring in new blood.
Wow.
And so if you see the structure of our force, it's a lot of young folks, and then they start to get older as the force continues to mature and be more professional. So the second term realignment, the career military folks have to compete in those first 4 years. So imagine a little door at the end of a big hallway that keeps just closing in on you. And a lot of us don't know that when we join, right? Now extrapolate that into all the other services. You have to compete to get to re-enlist. And so I realized in my thesis in Monterey for my master's program that there was a lot of wasted time between the time that you recruit an individual and the time that they go to training. In those 3 months or 6 months, depending how long it takes, people drop out because they want to do something. People want to work. And so in that process, I also realized that, well, in the military, we are spitting out these great professionals that they have now been trained, groomed, and developed, and nobody is picking them up. And so I realized that there was a need for this at a larger scale than just a 1-week transition program. And why is that? It takes 13 weeks to make a Marine enlisted. It takes 6 months to take a civilian and make him a military Marine officer. That's just the basics. Basic Marine infantry officer. 6 months. On the other end, you got 1 week to get out.
Let's look at this statistic Cesar discusses. The largest unemployment group within the military is comprised of those in the age bracket of the 20s to 30s. This begs the question, how are we embracing our military veterans in the civilian workforce? While I may not have the answer to that question, I was curious about how the Military Veteran Transition Playbook program addresses this issue. So I'm sensing a gap. How does this program aim to fill that gap to what's currently offered?
So the playbook takes an approach of first helping veterans decide when you get out. Like I told you, there's a first term realignment. So we have right there at the 4-year mark an opportunity to help veterans figure out what to do early on. And before they figure out what to do, we want to help them discover who they are and when they should do it. Then the next time that you see the statistical analysis, and I say this because I was my degree in Naval Postgraduate School was in manpower systems. So you figure I was able to analyze data of how populations move through the military. At what year marks are our veterans getting out in masses? See, that's what we don't get to study enough. Right? We know unemployment rates and we look at this on a monthly basis. But when we look at military personnel, how do we know when the military is having big masses of people exiting the military? And when, well, they happen at 4 years. They happen again around the 7-year mark. And then they start to happen again at the 13-year mark. In the bigger, you know, when you see the spikes, right? At least in the Marine Corps, again, this can be adapted to every military branch. But those surges in those gaps allow you to see when and how a military member should be supported in their transition. And if we can align a program like the MVTP to really capture them in the right lane and bring them in on the right phase so they can develop their playbook. See, because that's what I learned at the end of those 10 years. It wasn't that one transition program taught me something. I went to the transition program in Pendleton. I went to the one in Iwakuni, Japan. I went to the one in Quantico. And I went to 2 other ones. I can't remember the names right now. But I realized that I was gathering information that it was different. And so I now had a playbook. I figured out that there was a lot of components to my strategy that needed to be studied, analyzed, developed, filtered, and then try to pick the course of action that best fit my family, my time in the service, my rank, my position, all of these factors that really make a composite. So this playbook fills a gap that a lot of veterans struggle with when they're up at night. I talk about what keeps you up at night, and they're unable to figure out, why can't I do what my buddy did when he transitioned? How come he looked like he figured it out? He didn't. Nobody has it figured out. But the MVTP allows you to really put things into the mind of a veteran. We understand phases, levels, approaches, milestones, objectives, tasks, and that's the mission, to try to get through the program in a phased approach. Start by figuring out when, then figure out who, then what, then how, then where, and then execute. It's something we understand, and it helps us really adapt our strategy to say, okay, now I know where I fit in. I think that gap will be filled a lot more effectively once we have more support from the services, as well as more integration among programs out there that are really, really good. There's a lot of programs that are really good, and I hope that they join our MVTP program.
Cesar mentions a lot of programs out there that are really good. He highlighted one in his last episode.
All right, so before I begin, I also want to talk about Onward to Opportunity. I met with John today. John Gucci Malfitano is the program manager of this awesome program called Onward to Opportunity, or OTO. And this program is a program that allows veterans to get free training in 3 tracks. We got customer service excellence, business management, or information technology. And they partner up with another program called Virginia Cyber Training Pilot,
yes.
I believe.
Yeah, I believe so.
Onward to Opportunity is a national program. So you don't have to be in Virginia to take advantage of this program. You can be anywhere in the world, actually. And if you are qualified, meaning they have to verify that you are DD-214, your DD-214 is good to go, that you got an honorable discharge, and you're actually in transition, and you can certainly take this training. And so this is the awesome thing about this. You take this training, which is free, and then you do 2 pre-test exams. And then when you got to go for the certification, which costs money, it's free as well. This is an amazing program, and John is leading it. I'm very proud of what he's doing. I'm very supportive of what he's up to. We're going to have him here on one of our shows to talk about the program in more detail, because I don't want to give you the wrong information. But you got to go to Onward, the number 2, Opportunity dash VCTP. That's Victor Charlie Tango Papa.org. And you can begin your certification program. I'm very, very excited about that program. I think it's an awesome program for veterans, and I wanted to make sure he's networked into our program tonight.
Yes, absolutely. And Cesar, as we've learned about Onward to Opportunity, you had the great opportunity to meet with them, all about connections.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Just their program, and to be able to be tied into a national career service, Hire Heroes USA, and to be able to get that opportunity to have that sit-down interview with companies that are hiring today for the fields that you have, that's
the value of the program. It's such a holistic approach, right? They give you the training, they get you certified, and then they put you in front of hiring professionals and companies that can actually take you right on the spot.
Yep.
I mean, that's an amazing program. They started it this year, 2017, and they're about to meet their goal. They got to have 200 folks. I think they're up to 130. Sign up today. Sign up before the end of the year. There's open enrollment going on right now. Like I said, it's Onward, the number 2, Opportunity opportunity-vctp.org. Do we have it up on the screen?
Yes, yep. Just look on the screen, onward to opportunity-vctp.org.
Okay, let's talk about phase one. You said that's where it starts. So let's
That's
get
it.
into this playbook. Phase one, tell me about phase one, the when.
So first you gotta think about what makes a veteran decide that they want to get out. A lot of times it's not their own choice. A lot of us come in to serve and to defend our country, to be the patriot you always wanted to be. Others come because it's a family tradition. It's fourth generation veteran and it's their time to serve. Others do it because, believe it or not, when I was joining, it was a matter of the judge saying Marine Corps or jail. Nowadays, it's a lot more selective, so we definitely got better quality military personnel. But there's different reasons why we join. Why we get out is very diverse. Some people get kicked out, dishonorable discharge. Some people get discharged by medical reasons. Others, they don't have a choice. Maybe their spouse says, if we don't get out, I'm out. I'm gone, right? And they get out. She still leaves, but they get out. It happened to one of my friends, actually, and he ended up going back into the military to a different branch. But the truth is that we never figure out when is the right time to leave because we are kind of at the mercy of what may happen. If we don't get promoted, we may have to get out. If we get a medical discharge, well, now we get out. And so I think that giving a veteran a starting point of when should you get out, it's almost like, why'd you join? You planned it. You decided when you were coming in by making an assessment. Okay, I'm finishing high school. I have a high school degree. I got to pass the ASVAB test or the AFCT at the MEP station. I got to get a medical exam, a physical exam. You see, there's a purpose for when we come in, and there's a win when we come in. There is no win when we come out if we don't plan it, if we don't make it intentional. I think veterans just tend to go with, well, I guess I now have to figure out what to do because I'm being forced out. So that win gives you an opportunity to explore your options better and decide versus being told that you have to get out. Within that phase, now you have 4 components that make your assessment for the quadrants that I talk about, right? You have to assess your personal position. Where are you as an individual? You know, how do you figure out, okay, am I ready to get out? Do I feel like this has been a rewarding career and is it my time? Then you have your professional. Maybe you were in a career position that taught you some cyber and you realize that there's a lot of opportunities out there, and specifically cyber is one of them. There's a gap in the supply chain for professionals with cyber experience. Cyber is only about 10 years old, to be quite frank with you. And there's not enough professionals. So think about it, the father of cyber is probably in our age group because it's not a very, and they called it different things before, but cyber as an actual career, it's not that old. And so when a military guy or gal learns cyber for the first 4 years and they are the best at it, they should have an opportunity to assess whether they want to continue to serve and stay or get out. And that professional quadrant allows them to analyze their opportunities and how those opportunities affect their decision. Then there's a family, right? Are you single, married with kids, single with a dog, married with a dog or a cat or a llama? No, we don't know. So assessing your family composition will give you a better understanding of when you want to get out based on how that family is flowing. Is your spouse pregnant, or are you guys considering having kids? Are you guys moving? Are the kids in high school? Should you wait until high school ends? You know, we as parents try to assess that when we move careers and why we do it based on the age of our kids and whether they have developed a community in the place. And then the final one is the finance. Sometimes it's just not the right time. And I think we forget that. And if we're going to be forced, we should plan ahead. You know, like Dave Ramsey says, you got to have an emergency fund and you got to plan for these expenses. But sometimes in the military, you're living paycheck to paycheck. And so it is critical to really understand whether it's the right time to move. Even if you wanted to get out, you should assess when, because it may not be the right time.
Let us review those 4 components to assess when deciding when to transition out of the military: personal, professional, family, and finance. Cesar delves more into why it is important to decide early when to transition out of the military in this next video.
Basic information, right? It takes 13 weeks to make a Marine, 26 weeks, the last time I checked, to make an officer, a Marine officer, years to become a professional. And according to Malcolm Gladwell, it takes 10,000 hours to become what's called an expert. And so if you think about how long it takes to get an expert, how long do you think it takes to become an expert career hunter? Not 1 week. If you go into TAPS 3 months out before you get out, and that's the only time you ever did TRS, you're just probably not going to get the right amount of professional experience. So whether you do 1 hour a night reading some of these resources, these are just a selected list. Read these resources. I can't tell you how valuable these are. How to win friends and influence people. It's true. When you are genuine about your principles and you really care about meeting people, it works. I did 200 screenings for interviews. I went on 47 different sit-down interviews. I know you're thinking this guy's whacked out. But you know why I did those interviews? Most of the jobs, I was not trying to get the job. Why did I do that? Training. Nothing prepares you for war like training. Good fortune and hard work do pay off. Start early. It'll be easier than cramming it all at the end of the day. You'll be able to replicate the success of other people if you learn and watch. Talk to those who are getting out. Talk to those who got out. Talk to those who are in the business that you want to be in. You should have what I call a personal board of advisors. People who know you, people who care about you. Because you want people to know about you and give you advice about you. Not the Marine, the one you have to be when you put on that uniform. You're not a Marine. You're an individual with core competencies who became a Marine and have achieved a certain level of success. This is the one thing that I captured in all those years that I was working on transition. That the decision you make about transition comes down to one of those three things. You're either going to decide to transition because of salary, job satisfaction, or location. It comes down to that. Now, pick right, and you will have a career. Pick wrong, you'll get a job. In a year or two, you'll get another, and another, and another. People first will say, well, I got to go for salary. I have to make a certain amount of money, right? I have to make a certain amount of money. I ask you, please don't confuse standard of living with quality of life. I assure you, most of us can live on very little money. This is a great country. We have a great economy. We have a good opportunity in this country to do a lot of stuff. A lot of us confuse the concept of standard of living, which we have escalated ourselves to because we have to, right? We have to have these things. I need that boat. Without that boat, I just cannot, I need my stuff. And I assure you, it's not true. Quality of life, I don't want to sound like a preacher. Quality of life will set you free. Standard of living will tie you down. Moral of the story before we go on a break, first decide when you're going to exit. This follows the 6 phases of the transition process. Then discover who you are outside of being a Marine. Every phase follows one of those themes: when, who, what, how, where, and act.
As those Marines can relate, this information is important to know early in your military career. It is clearly on their minds, but just how much? I asked Cesar about this. Now, I've heard you talk about it can keep you up at night. What advice do you have to those that are literally staying up at night, worrying about what am I going to do when I get out of the military? My goodness, what am I going to do? What would you say to those people?
Watch our YouTube channel. That's the first advice.
I think
if you're going to be up at night anyways, might as well watch the METP. You know? It'll probably help you calm the anxiety. It's better than any drug out there. So watch our channel, because then you can have some answers. But really, and again, while it's comical, it's true. Watch the Military Veteran Transition Playbook channel, because there you will see yourself. You will realize that what's keeping you up at night It's keeping me up at night too. When I was in your shoes, it's keeping your neighbor up at night, and it's keeping America up at night. We're all struggling to figure out, are we doing enough? Are we doing the right thing? Are we making the right decisions for our family? And that's why I talk about, make sure you also talk to your spouse about it, because she or he is probably trying to help. And watching you struggle alone makes it more difficult for them, but you're trying to say, well, I don't want to burden them with it. This is my cross. And sometimes we forget that they're involved in the process. So the second advice I give them is, as you start to look into, we're going to put together some booklets to give veterans the ability to work through some of those issues that are keeping them up at night, and start to develop a playbook of strategies that will help them decide and be in charge of their transition. That's probably, if you ask me, what is the ultimate goal? It would be to really empower veterans to have a decision that they can say, okay, well, I know I can do this, this, or this, and my time to do it is here, and where I want to do it is over here. We talked about location, job satisfaction, and salary being the three factors that affect us all, whether military or not, as to how we make those decisions. And I think what keeps people up at night is that. It's the finances, it's the career decision. Are we making the right move? When should we do it? Do I take the promotion and wait? Is the current command that I have going to send me to another 18-month deployment? I just got off one. My newborn. Those things that keep you up at night are simply the consequence of you not having a strategy and a plan for what happens. Because life is difficult, no doubt about it, right? We don't have to make it more difficult by adding that anxiety.
Yeah. This portion of the interview struck a personal chord for me. What keeps me up at night? Am I doing enough? Am I doing it right? Am I making the right decisions for my family? Think about these questions. Yes, life is difficult. We do not need to make it more difficult. He says, it's keeping your neighbor up at night, and it's keeping America up at night. I would agree. This poses my next question in regards to phase 1. When do you recommend people consider transitioning out?
Well, it depends. That's such a broad question. It goes back to why we developed the NVTP. It's a personal question, right?
Yeah.
And I know it's redundant and seems like there's a pun intended, but you really have to sit down with your personal board of advisors that I talk about, that you should select 3 to 5 people that you trust, not just your spouse, but people who knew you before the military and have nothing to do with the military. Maybe someone who you always go to for advice, whether it's your pastor, whether it's your mentor, your brother, your sister, your mom or dad. But get that group of advisors and then tell them what you're struggling with, what's keeping you up at night, and then get their advice and recommendations. And the difference is, and this is critical to point out, I'm digressing a little bit, because a lot of times we tend to be unable to make decisions because so many people are giving us advice. Do I wear a coat or do I not? Do I put a hat on or do I not? The decision is ultimately mine. And I think we forget that we have to make the decision. That what we're getting is advice. We're getting recommendations. Some of us look for the answer in our advisors, in our counselors, in our board of advisors. And we have to understand that their advice only comes from a good place. They know us. We ultimately have to make that decision as to when we should transition. And it has to be a personal decision. Even as you are in a family, if you're the head of the house or you know you are charged with that, you have to make that decision personally to ensure that it is the best decision you can come up with given the information, the time, and the resources you have.
Do I wear a scarf? Should I pull my hair back? Should I wear my suit jacket? These were all questions I had before beginning my interview with Cesar. I posed these questions to Cesar and our production team. The decision was ultimately mine, yet I sought advice from those I trusted, my personal board of advisors in the studio. This is no different from our careers and transitioning out from one to the next. Whether you're military or civilian, choose your board of advisors wisely. It makes sense. Cesar highlights the importance of role models in this next video clip.
The role models that I have looked up to probably since I can remember, it had to start with my mother. I always saw my mother as a very resourceful person. She was a single mom raising 5 children. I was the oldest of those 5. And I knew that as long as she was satisfied with my performance, that I was doing great. Because I looked up to her and I said, how can a woman do so much, be so strong, so resourceful? I mean, there were days that we were just eating rice and cheese or hot dog rice and cheese or tuna rice and egg. And it was a combination of those meals that kind of shaped even how I eat today. So seeing how resourceful and flexible she was probably started my ability to think outside the box. Watching my grandfather be successful was a great inspiration because he was a guy who used to fix radios when he was married to my grandmother. And he became the general manager of Philips, one of the largest companies, at least in South America, doing refrigerators, kitchens, telecommunications. So it was a really great inspiration to see a man that I knew so close have the ability to live a life like that. You see, when I grew up in Ecuador, having a car that had air conditioning, you were rich. To have people have their windows up when they were driving, you were rich. So I always wanted to know what it feels like to drive with the air conditioner on, because we didn't. So that kind of inspiration for what does it take to be that guy taught me that to get to that position, you have to travel a very long road, which is the entrepreneurial road. It will be littered with challenges and tripwires and all sorts of booby traps. But if you keep going and you don't let anything stop you, you'll get there. Beyond that, as I grew up, I had other role models. When I was growing up, I loved superheroes, Captain America, Iron Man, Superman, Batman. I mean, that is just, I wanted to be that. I wanted to, Bruce Wayne, rich guy, but he wanted to be a superhero, right? Superman, he could have done whatever he wanted, but he wanted to help people, right? Iron Man. I mean, those were, I guess, my role models to share with almost any one of us that grows up in that era. Then as I joined the Marine Corps, I learned about Chesty Puller, Dan Daly, Smedley Butler, Medal of Honor winners. Men who sacrificed themselves for the good of others. Mottos like, hey, you sons of, do you want to live forever? That statement made Marines get up and attack the enemy. Trying to understand what men like that are like and wanting to be like those men is what inspired me to continue to seek greatness. And I'm still in search of that. Then role models like the people I mentioned to you that have been business owners that basically started just the way I did it. A Marine with his rifle. Just an American trying to find his way. And I met, dozens of successful people that at the first glance don't look successful to the naked eye. But they're successful in so many other ways that you and I don't consider success, and they're happy. And so those role models have been able to make a composite, a puzzle for how I want to be when I'm successful someday. I take the best traits of every person I meet. I think, how does a guy that tells me about his heart attack a year ago is going to make me successful when I see him smiling today and thinking, well, if he made it, if I ever have a heart attack, I'm going to remember that smile because I'm going to smile too. And those experiences shape how my role models continue to be more relevant in my life. It's very important to me to always see what makes those people feel that way. And I hope that makes sense to you.
It makes sense to me. Now I am eager to learn more about the next phase of the playbook. Let's return to the interview. So we've talked about when, and when we'll segue into which phase?
We are now into who.
Who,
Once
okay.
you figure out when you want to get out, then the next question is, okay, who am I? Because a lot of times we start with what?
Yeah.
See, we want to go do something. Say, well, what's hot out there? Oh, cyber. I'm going to go do cyber.
Yeah.
And then we figure out, okay, what's the gap between cyber and me? It's I make the analogy of, I love the America's Got Talent show because Simon Cowell is very brutal, right?
Oh, yeah.
He always asks,
Yep.
like, who told you could sing? Or who told you you had talent? I think it's the same analogy. Sometimes we think that, well, if I choose that I want to be cyber, then I should be able to do it. When sometimes the answer is more of, who am I really? Meaning, what am I passionate about? What do I know really well? What do I want to do? Right? And what's my personality like? Because we tend to force ourselves into environments that sometimes we don't like. You hear this a lot, right? When you go to a social event, are you the type that likes to talk or likes to be alone?
Oh, I like to talk.
See,
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
others who just want to be just alone. Glass of something and just, I can't approach you. I will talk if people approach me, but I won't approach them. Your personality is such that you'll attack the room and you start socializing, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we're forced into the wrong personality, right? Hey, you got to get out there. You got to network.
Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
out there and network.
Yeah.
Go shake hands. And that's because we don't know who we are. You notice that there are parts of you that flush out naturally when you're in the environment that you love. And right now you're thinking about it, right? Let me think of where am I at my most comfortable. And that's what I talk about in the who. Get to the place where you can be comfortable with who you are. So when you're in an interview, you're not trying to sell yourself.
Yeah.
You're really trying to show yourself so they can see who you are, not what they're going to buy. A lot of times our branding is just misguided, mislabeled. And we tend to want to do what we see the messages out there tell us to do. Hey, you got to go out there and wear the power suit and make sure that you have a firm handshake. And when you and you touch the elbow, all these strategies about how to read body language. Be you. But you can't be you if you don't know who you are.
Yeah.
And so in that phase 2, we talk about doing a personality test. And you can do a different variety of personality tests, but do the one that you like most. I talk about the Myers-Briggs because it has a fun 4-letter code, like I'm an ENTJ. Do you know what you are?
I do not.
And so ENTJs tend to be just naturally outspoken, outgoing, and so on. I didn't know I was an ENTJ. I thought I was a very, very shy introvert. Yeah, when I was a kid, that's what I felt like I was.
Wow.
The Marine Corps flushed out of me my true personality. And then when I was leaving the Corps, what I realized is that if I took the personality test once, like the Myers-Briggs, it wasn't as accurate. Because what happens when you have a room full of veterans and you say, raise your hand if you're a leader?
Right.
How many of you think raise their hands?
I hope everybody.
Everybody, right? You hope everybody does.
Leader.
But the truth is that 3/4 of that room wish that they didn't raise their hand. They don't want to be leaders.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with not wanting to be a leader.
Right.
I had a great conversation with a battalion commander down in Lejeune, and he was in the room with his unit. He was a colonel, and imagine, right? The colonel walks in, everybody stands up, attention on deck. He says, "Carry on." Everybody sits down. He sits right there with his paper and pen, and I start doing my seminar. And I asked the question, how many of you are leaders? And they all raised their hand and looked at the colonel, and the colonel didn't raise his hand. And I said, "Sir, thank you for your honesty, but why didn't you raise your hand?" He goes, "Cesar, I love what I do. I'm a Marine leader, no question about it. But when I get out, I want to just go get a job where I don't have to be responsible for anybody. I just want to do my job, go home, kiss my wife, be with my kids, play with my dog, and do that every day." I was like, "Thank you, sir. That's exactly what I wanted to hear." It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't planned. It was just his ability to demonstrate that when you are comfortable with who you are, you don't have to pretend to be what you're not. And so that test, when you take it at first, the questions are designed to almost be like, well, are you a leader?
Yeah.
I am a leader.
Right.
You know, in social settings, are you the life of the party? Well, I want to be the life of the party.
Exactly.
That wasn't the question, but I want to be the life of the party.
Yeah, yep.
So you mark that.
Yep.
And so you take it in a biased way based on what you think the person who wrote the questions wants to hear. So I always tell people, take it in 3 different ways. Take it once with the transition assistance office on base, where they have certified instructors that can do that. Then take it online. Just pick anywhere. Go to Dr. Google and say, you know, Myers-Briggs, and just take it. And then take another one in a separate setting, not on base, not with Google, but maybe separately and on a bubble sheet, and see how they compare. Also take it throughout your career to see how you transition and your own understanding of you and how more comfortable you are when you really know what you want to do. Because when you figure out who you are, then the what in phase 3 becomes a natural progression. So that personality test is key, right? Then you got your interest. You want to know what you're passionate about. Why couldn't you match your personality with your interest? If there was a career out there who could do that, why not pick it? But you won't know until you do that. What are your true interests? Are you really passionate about going to the range and firing an M16 500 yards away? Maybe not. Maybe you're good at it, but why are you good at it? Maybe because you like to do things just in a very detailed manner. You like to learn the process and then execute and perform well. You want to be number 1. But why is that? What are your interests? What are the things that make you passionate? Me, I love gardening. I love trimming knockout roses. The satisfaction I get from having to just dig in, plant it, and then watch it grow, and then trim it to watch it grow again, it's my passion. But does that translate into a Marine Corps skill? It didn't back then. If I had said that in uniform, people would be like, what's wrong with you, devil dog? If I had said that in Recruit Depot, I would have been pushing. So finding your interest is almost like a journey, right? And then a skills inventory. This is where you really take an assessment of what you've learned. There's nothing wrong with what the military taught you. If you're in the Navy and you learn all of these exceptional technical courses, and you have that as also a piece of your puzzle, why not use it to complement your profile, right? That composite of you. And then we have interests, we have your personality, you have your skills inventory, and then you have your strengths. I talk about a book, I think it's Find Your Strengths 2.0. It's the one that I read and the one that I used, so I naturally gravitate towards it. And it allows you to figure out what are you strong in terms of core competencies and skills and things like that. So when you match these, doesn't it just seem natural that you can say, it's like reading your horoscope. So, oh yeah, that's me.
Yeah,
that's me. The same thing happens in phase 2 when you want to figure out who you are. You get a composite that allows you now to put the 2 pieces together. When I want to get out and who I am, now let me figure out effectively what I want to do.
What do I want to do? This goes back to the idea that we make decisions based on the advice from those we seek out. It makes sense that we would answer test questions the same way. So who am I? This is who I am. Since I was in high school, I knew I loved capturing and telling stories. This guided my career decisions and my dreams. I am living my dream right now on camera, sharing the story. Now for the conclusion of our interview. Well, we've talked about phase 1 and we've talked about phase 2, and anything else you want to add? I think that's a great combo to understand phase 1 and phase 2 and how they go together. Anything further that you want to add to kind of wrap up those two?
From those 2 phases, I think that's it. That's the most important piece for the foundation. Phase 2 really comes as the next piece. It's a kind of a trifecta. You get through those 2 phases first. They're difficult because they're not as easy to just say, where do I read that? Nobody told me that I had to figure out the when and the who. They told me the what.
Yeah.
So they're very, very, that's what we put 6 months for each of those 2. We put them at the 2-year mark. Start 2 years out, right? That's the whole point. You start 2 years out and you take 6 months to figure out when and who you are so you can start driving into the what.
It's been an honor being on your show, Cesar.
Thank you.
And hand the reins over to you.
Thank you. And I hope that you enjoyed this episode because, again, Jen did a great job at flushing out some of the things that had been, from the beginning, a question of why did I start this and why is it so important? And how can we make sure that every veteran has an important transition playbook that fits them? So thank you for watching. We appreciate you guys. Don't forget to join us on YouTube. on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Snapchat, and all those other social medias. I'm your host, Cesar Nader, and my producer, Abe Erickson, behind the cameras here, as well as our assistant producer, Dan, is with us today. Thank you so much, and God bless America. Remember, we never leave a fellow veteran behind. Hoorah.
Again, let me say, hoorah. I first want to thank you, Cesar, for inviting me on your show. Thank you for your service in our military and for all you continue to do for our military veterans. I also want to thank you, the viewers, for tuning in tonight. I believe this information is invaluable, not only for our military veterans, but for our society as a whole. I believe you will find golden nuggets you can apply to your life, whatever season of life you are in. Subscribe to the Military Veteran Transition Playbook channel on YouTube and tune in next week. Good night.